This story is about a daughter-in-law who gave a satisfying response when her sister-in-law, who received the inheritance on the condition of taking care of their mother, threatened to sue if she did not divide the property immediately after the funeral. What could have happened? Let's find out together. Please subscribe and like our channel.
Hello, I'm a woman in my early 50s with middle and high school children. Not long ago, we held a funeral for my mother-in-law. She passed away after spending about a year in a nursing home. I had even obtained a caregiver's certificate, with the intention of taking care of her. But I feel like a bad daughter-in-law for leaving her in a nursing home till the end. When I first got married, it was really hard to adjust to my mother-in-law's personality. I was often scolded and reprimanded by her. She was the type of person who had to put things back in their place after using them. She wouldn't easily throw away used items. And she would even wash wooden chopsticks for reuse. My husband's family is wealthy, and it was hard for me to understand why my mother-in-law, who grew up as a daughter of a wealthy family, behaved in such a way. To be honest, I didn't like it. I thought it was unsanitary to reuse wooden chopsticks after washing and drying them. Because of these differences in lifestyle, I initially had some conflicts with my mother-in-law. As the one with lower status, I had to endure many things and received a significant amount of stress. My mother-in-law had a personality where she would always point out things she didn't like, which was very hard for me. During the early days of our marriage, it was unusual for my husband to get involved in such conflicts. After giving birth to my second child, I quit my job. I felt very depressed at that time. I had to quit the job I had been working at for over 10 years right after graduating from college, due to my mother-in-law's insistence. As soon as I became pregnant with my second child, my mother-in-law told me to quit my job and focus on raising the kids. Initially, I refused, but I eventually quit my job. My mother-in-law offered to give me as much money as I was earning as a condition for me to quit my job. In fact, she gave me more money than my monthly salary every month. Still, I felt empty. Going to work was not just about earning money for me. However, I couldn't insist on going to work and leaving my increasingly aging mother-in-law with the household chores and child-rearing. My husband was very successful at his company. He always got promoted faster than his peers and was recognized by the company. There was a time when I felt upset whenever I heard him getting promoted and recognized at the company, thinking, "What is this for me?" As I was busy raising the kids, I put aside my regret and just lived my life. I had quite a lot of conflicts with my mother-in-law over raising the kids. I wanted to raise the kids freely, but my mother-in-law believed it was important to instill habits from a young age. I didn't quite agree with her educational philosophy of teaching various things to the kids from an early age. Even during family trips, my mother-in-law would try to give the kids some kind of experience. I just wanted to play happily with the kids without any thoughts. But I couldn't because of her. It took quite a long time for me to feel comfortable with my mother-in-law. Sometime later, when I looked back, I realized that although my mother-in-law nagged at me a lot, there were many times when I didn't follow her advice. Also, she didn't often repeat the same nagging to me. I'm sure she must have been angry when I didn't listen to her. But she never showed her anger at me. I was burdensome to my mother-in-law, but I'm sure she found me burdensome as well. How frustrated must she have been with a daughter-in-law who wouldn't listen to her, even though it was obvious? After realizing these things, I think I was able to get along with my mother-in-law a bit more comfortably. My kids are good at studying. I didn't like my mother-in-law's educational philosophy, and I still don't. However, I can't deny that the kids are now interested in studying and doing their work well. thanks to my mother-in-law. My sister-in-law seemed to dislike me from the beginning. I never understood why my sister-in-law disliked me so much. I later realized it was because of my mother-in-law. Whenever my sister-in-law visited us, she would nag endlessly about taking good care of my mother-in-law. Whenever she spoke to me in a harsh tone, my mother-in-law would scold her fiercely, telling her to take care of her own family. My sister-in-law used to complain a lot about me to my mother-in-law. I'm sure I had my faults. And there were things about me that my mother-in-law didn't like. I sometimes wonder if they both talked behind my back about me. But my mother-in-law never spoke ill of me to my sister-in-law. A few years ago, my mother-in-law started to feel unwell and felt the need to distribute her wealth. She sat my husband and me down and asked us about our thoughts on her wealth distribution. We told her to do as she wished. After a while, she hesitantly suggested that she would like to live with my sister-in-law. She felt that as she was getting older and needed care, it would be easier for her daughter to take care of her than her daughter-in-law. I felt a mix of emotions. I wondered if I had been a burden to my mother-in-law, or if she said this because I hadn't taken care of her well enough. My mother-in-law decided to give part of the wealth she had promised to give us to my sister-in-law and live with her. My husband and I had no choice but to respect her decision. My mother-in-law lived with my sister-in-law for about a month. One day, we got a call from my mother-in-law, and we went to my sister-in-law's house to bring her back. After receiving the inheritance, my sister-in-law neglected my mother-in-law and even made her do house chores, even though her health wasn't good. It must have been very hard for my mother-in-law, who had a lot of pride, to receive such treatment from her own daughter. She endured this for a few weeks before she decided to call me. When we brought my mother-in-law back, she apologized to us. She felt sorry for giving the inheritance she had promised to us to her daughter, without realizing what would happen. She said, "I still have times when I get confused. As my dementia progresses, it will be harder for you. Don't hesitate to put me in a nursing home." I cried and told her that I would never do that. A few days later, my mother-in-law revealed that she had a bank account that she hadn't mentioned to her children, and asked us to make a gift in our joint names. We completed the cash gift procedure, and my mother-in-law called my sister-in-law and her husband. She had asked me to record their conversation. To my sister-in-law and her husband, my mother-in-law said, "I have given this amount of wealth to my son, because I live off him, and this amount of wealth to you. So you should have no complaints in the future." My sister-in-law agreed at the time. According to my husband, she was happy because she received additional wealth for agreeing to take care of my mother-in-law and didn't have to do it anymore. But he said she would definitely cause problems later. After that, my mother-in-law's health deteriorated significantly. It was heartbreaking to see her health fluctuate between getting worse and stabilizing. There were times when I hoped that my mother-in-law would find peace quickly, harboring such a disloyal thought. Eventually, my mother-in-law became mentally unstable, and my husband suggested that we send her to a nursing home. I was against it, but everyone around me said the same. So we had to send her to a nursing home. After sending my mother-in-law to the nursing home, I cried every night for a few days, but I felt somewhat relieved. I had a sense of anticipation that I could live a bit more comfortably. I failed to keep my promise to my mother-in-law that I would take care of her until the day she passed away. How can I be forgiven for this sin? After sending my mother-in-law to the nursing home, we visited her on weekends. As I was busy taking care of the kids, my remorse towards my mother-in-law gradually faded. During this time, my mother-in-law's health deteriorated rapidly, and after receiving several emergency calls from the hospital and rushing to her side, we had to let her go. During those few months, I wished for my mother-in-law, who was suffering so much, to find peace. You may criticize me for having such a presumptuous thought, being the daughter-in-law who couldn't even keep her promise. Just a few days after holding my mother-in-law's funeral, my sister-in-law called my husband. She asked him to split the money in the bank account that our mother-in-law had given us at the end. My husband told her not to say such ridiculous things. My sister-in-law also called me. She said that since I had sent my mother-in-law to a nursing home, I should split the money in the bank account with her, which I had received on the condition of taking care of my mother-in-law. I was so infuriated that I blurted out curses. How dare you say such a thing? After receiving a significant inheritance on the condition of taking care of our mother, and then neglecting her and kicking her out? I cursed at my sister-in-law. She laughed and said she would do it legally. I told her to do as she pleased and hung up. My husband received another call, and he told my sister-in-law, "Now, I understand why our mother asked us to record our conversation when she wanted to confirm that you had no complaints about the inheritance. We thought it was too much, but it seems our mother knew you would act this way." Our mother explained why she distributed her wealth the way she did. And you said you had no complaints about it. Everything from that day is recorded, so go ahead and try it legally. A year has passed since then, and we have not heard anything from my sister-in-law. Looking back, I realize that my mother-in-law was right, and I was wrong about so many things. But there were times when I was rebellious against my mother-in-law's nagging. She was a generous mother-in-law who tolerated and waited for a young daughter-in-law who couldn't readily accept her intentions and was sometimes rebellious. I miss my mother-in-law so much. If there is a next life, I hope she is born as my daughter.
Ah, what a kind-hearted daughter-in-law. The things she thought she did wrong to her mother-in-law were due to her not knowing any better at the time. Now, she acknowledges and regrets them. Her mother-in-law probably knew all about her feelings long before she became a star in the sky.